Hello everyone, this is a video to help you figure out how to configure OBS volume levels a little bit better, hopefully. I don't really claim to be a professional in these things, but I think I have a decent idea of how to get a good sound for your stream, for your video content, but definitely check out other people for stuff like specific hardware recommendations for your microphones, for your hardware audio interfaces, hardware compressors, things like that. But overall, this is more on a generic level and how to do it regardless of what hardware you're stuck with, in case you just happen to have a shitty microphone and can't really afford to buy one. So it should work pretty much universally. And it's more about just the volume levels and how to get them right. So how to find the balance between the game audio and your volume, your microphone, and how to ensure that if you sometimes get a bit excited, if you shout a little, that it won't completely ruin the viewer experience by giving them a massive distortion with the microphone clipping, and how to make sure that you're heard over the game instead of being overpowered by it. Stuff like this. Primarily this is for OBS Studio, but it should really work probably for anything with VSTPlugins, and even if your software of choice doesn't support VSTPlugins, there's a thing called VST Host for Windows, probably something similar for other OSs as well, where you can, combining it with something like virtual audio cable, you can get your VST plugins between the microphone and the capturing software, and use that for all the things that we're doing right now in this video, and that should get you similar effects regardless of what environment you're in. Right, let's switch to this view so you can see my OBS. So I've actually got two computers set up, so that might confuse a few things here if you don't keep that in mind. But basically what you want to keep in mind when doing these things in OBS are these two things. So microphone levels, desktop audio levels, and these sliders control the master volume for OBS. Usually what I try to do with this is I try to keep attention to the colored areas. So green is typically fairly quiet, except at the top edge of it, it's starting to be like really easily audible. But if it's like all the way down here, it's usually pretty quiet. And then if it starts to go to yellow, it's usually quite loud, and on red, it's in danger of being clipping. Now, what I try to do personally, and I try to recommend it to others because I feel it works best, is to aim for a setup where your microphone is on the red almost all the time. It's like on the top edge of yellow, and near the top of the red is the range where you want it to be. Never on like full, because that means clipping, and there's another possibility with clipping as well that we're gonna go through later. But I want it to be like clearly at near the maximum level that you can get through. And one of the reasons is mobile, because when people on mobile are watching your content, they can't crank up the volume like indefinitely. There's a limit, and if you put the volume on your end to be as high as possible, then they don't have to do the same on their end, and that helps a little bit. And then on the desktop audio, so your games, your whatever content, try to make it so that it's right at the edge between the yellow and green, typically so that the loudest bits, like right now the music is quite loud compared to some of the other bits of it. Try to aim that goes just a little bit above the yellow, and then it's usually pretty good. It depends a little bit on how much focus there is on the audio. Sometimes I crank it up a little bit, usually not too much, especially if I want to talk at the same time, but usually somewhere there, and it's going to be pretty good. Sometimes even a little lower if it's annoying or it's important and you want sort of the freedom to talk over it much more easily. But that's usually the guideline I'm going for. So aim for the desktop audio to be at the top edge of the green, and for your mic to be at the top edge of yellow and on the red usually. Then one thing that we can do to test out if these levels are good is just use the built-in features. Stop recording after a couple of seconds and listen up how it sounds like. You can hear from that with these settings it's completely overpowering me. So what we're gonna do is just try those couple of quick things. We're gonna drop this. Let me just put the game back on, so that that's like there-ish. And we're gonna have the microphone be at maximum volume for now. I'm using a second microphone for the recording, the OBS that's being demonstrated has this thing on it, so the audio quality is probably pretty shit on that, but who cares? That's not the point. So yeah, let's record a couple of seconds of me talking over the game, and then stop recording again, mute that, listen to it. Record a couple of seconds of me talking over the game, and now you can already hear me. It's still not perfect, and definitely the audio quality on this is far from perfect, but it's a little bit better, I think. One thing that you can also try, which usually drives me crazy, but it's something you might like, is if you go to Advanced Audio Properties, so right click on these things and then use the monitoring here, then that will allow you to listen to it in real time as well. And that might be something that you like, especially when you're tweaking various filters. That might be more easy for you to figure out what are the correct settings, but when finding the correct levels, it might not be that useful. I don't know, it's up to you. Let's see what else. Then if you open your Windows Start menu and type in sound and hit enter, you can't see what I just did, but I did exactly that. And go to recording, and you got your microphone, and then levels. Make sure that this, if you have, usually it's like between 0 and 100, make sure it's not like super low. That might be something that with some hardware, that's like the default setting is that like the microphone levels are very low here. And usually if you've got something like the range from 0 to 100, 80 is usually somewhere where you get a good level, but you don't get any distortion. Above that, sometimes you get distortion. You have to tweak it out for yourself with your own hardware and try it out, what's good for you, but remember to check this and make sure that it seems good. Right, so turn down desktop audio, check the sound control panel. After that, the next thing we want to check is filters. So OBS now has, on OBS Studio, you've got these filters for audio. So you go there, and what we're gonna do to improve the audio a little bit is, if I'm gonna shut up for a moment, see how that's stuck here. So while there's quiet bits in your game or whatever content, that's going to be something people are going to hear. Usually it's whatever fans you have around, something like that. It's little noise that still gets through to the microphone that is not you. And you usually don't want that. So some people use a noise gate, and usually what happens with this, you can get it to vanish completely probably with just these default settings. But what happens with that is usually if you use a noise gate, what happens is you get the hiss and then it suddenly goes away. Then there's a little bit of sound and then like you just get the hiss for a moment and then it goes away again. And that really sounds shitty, honestly. So noise suppression seems to work a lot better. So what I do with this is I find a level where it's just quiet enough to suppress everything, usually. So right now it seems to be like minus 12-ish. Minus 15. And then I usually go a little bit past that. So now it should suppress all the background noise well enough. On my other PC it's actually just set to minus 60. Not sure if it's on purpose, but I just noticed that it was on minus 60. It works fine. It might not work fine for your hardware, but that's something that you might want to keep in mind. So let's put it to just minus 20 for this, and that's going to be fine for us. Then the next thing that I put in the chain is a compressor. Now you can use the built-in compressor. I have really no experience with it. It could work well. You'll want to check out Google for how to set up a compressor for vocals, and you'll find a lot of guides. You'll even find Google telling you immediately here threshold, ratio, attack and release and so on. Those might work for you straight out of the box, those recommendations, but I feel you might want to tweak them. I had to tweak mine quite a bit to get it to work exactly like I wanted with my issues on my audio systems and so on. So this might work for you, might not. There's another option that is at least more intuitive to use, and that is to use a VST plugin. Let's call this a compressor, and it's a safe compressor, which is a free VST plugin. And how you get that is if you Google for safe plugins, you end up on Semantic Audio's website, project safe plugins, and here's the downloads for all the different operating systems and different CPU architectures. And it's all open source, GPL version 3. You can get it for free, no worries. And then the plugin directory that you need to extract it to, you can figure it out by just googling for VST plugin directory in your operating system. In case of Windows, it seems like the first Ableton link is I mean, it's probably going to work. It says Steinberg / VST plugins, program file Steinberg VST plugins. That's probably going to work. There's an even more generic one, which is just VST plugins under program files. And so what you do is when you download that release from there, you get a zip file with a couple of DLLs on it on Windows, probably something else on other platforms. You, especially on Windows, because there's permission things with the program files, what you want to do is you usually extract that on your downloads folder or your desktop, and from there you go to program files and create the folder VST plugins, and then inside that you try to copy them from your, like, after it's been extracted. Because usually the software that does the extracting, something like 7-zip, doesn't support the permission elevation or something like that, whatever it's called, which would give it the rights to copy the files there. But if you just do it with a Windows Explorer interface, just a file manager, then it'll ask you if you want to give it the permissions to copy the files there, and you'll get that. And once they're in the right folder, you restart your OBS, and you will get them visible when you select the VST2X plugin. Right, so you'll find guides on how to set it up. I personally, I think I'm using something like threshold, -15, ratio, something like 4, and attack I think is probably 5, and 500 for release, something like this. However, I'm using slightly different compressor software that came with my audio interface, so it's not exactly all identical, and the interface is a little bit different, but this should work quite well. And You can also use this for gain, but I don't have a lot of experience with this. If this gain has any issues, probably won't. I don't see why it would. Also, the knee is something you might want to try, but these are things that you need to figure out what works well for you. If you really want to, there's like a million presets that other people have already done that are probably terrible, but you may want to give a try to them. Good luck if you do. Maybe if someone knows a good one, put it in the comments and other people will find it. But yeah, set up a compressor. Did I actually leave that reasonable? Yeah, it seems reasonable for now. And then, because my compressor doesn't support the gain in a way that felt good for me, like it also has the gain for input and output, but it just felt somehow more difficult to manage in that interface. So what I do is I also add this gain here. And what I do is I'm looking at this bar here, the microphone bar, and then I bump up the gain here while I'm talking. And now that's something that you want to avoid. When the whole bar turns red, that means you're definitely peaking, and the audio is clipping, and everyone watching you is gonna hate you. So you want to turn it down until it's no longer doing that, but it's high enough. Ooh, still doing that. Come on. There we go. Now I think it doesn't do that. So now it's high enough that it's on the red a lot of the time. It's definitely at the top of the yellow, and then by tweaking the compressor settings and that gain, you're gonna find a nice, reasonable range that you want your voice to be in. Right. But usually you want to avoid two things with this volume bar here. First is that if it turns completely red, then you're definitely clipping. Another one is if you notice that if you're using, for example, a microphone with a gain on it, like a gain setting on it, or your audio interface has a volume dial. If you set that too high, you might end up with something that, like, it looks like there's just a flat end and it doesn't go above that. That probably also means that you're clipping, but it's happening somewhere else than OBS. So try to lower your volume everywhere until it's constantly moving when you're talking, and then try to just raise that range towards the red. Cool. So now we've got noise suppression, compression, and gain. And then what we're gonna do is, of course, we're gonna try again. How are the levels now? Or is it any better? I don't know. We'll find out. Stop recording. We mute the game so we can hear, and then again, how are the levels now? Or is it any better? I don't know. We'll find out. Definitely the microphone sounds like shit, which is no surprise to me. Again, how are the levels now? Or is it any better? But it definitely doesn't sound like it's this dynamic range, whatever it's called, is very large. But another thing to notice there is that the voice is clearly higher than the gain. So you can hear me. The mic is shit. There's probably nothing I can do about stopping this from distorting, but hopefully with your microphone you won't have similar issues. If you do, you usually just need to turn down the volumes a little bit, and then just at the end bump up the gain to raise it. So if you increase the volume too early, so to say, then you'll usually end up with that distortion problem. Or alternatively, if your incoming input volume is too low and then you try to raise it too high, then you'll definitely have audio quality issues as well. But if you try to find just the optimal level where you can talk and even shout if you do that, without it clipping at the input level, and then you put it through the suppression and the compression and then gain to bring it up, then you will usually find a good level. So if these are still confusing concepts, basically what it's all about is noise suppression is getting rid of all the background noise. So the fans, the little vibrations on your table from your case fans or whatever, things like that. Then you add the compression, and the idea with compression is that when you are loud, it brings those volumes down, and when you're quiet, it brings those up. So it reduces the range for the volume, and it does it so you don't have to constantly be adjusting your volume levels, basically. So if you're sometimes leaning a little bit back or sometimes leaning a little bit forward, then the range there for the volume doesn't change quite so much. And then same with if you sometimes talk a little bit more quietly and sometimes shout a little. I mean, that shouldn't make a massive difference to the end result. Sometimes you want that, but usually with something like gaming content, you want yourself to be just at the nice, even level over the game and clearly audible all the times. And then you want to avoid the clipping issue, which is something where compression alone won't help, because you need the source level to be low enough that it won't be clipping. But then with compression and then gain after that, you can make sure that you still get high enough volume without it clipping at the end if you get loud. Cool. So that's it. Can't think of what else to add. Do this like several times, tweak your settings, record, or use the advanced audio properties and audio monitoring, and you should find yourself good levels. Hopefully this helps, and I hope you leave your results in the comments if it helped you, if you think it was shit, or if you know a better guide, if you know good guides on choosing microphones or anything other that's relevant. This video isn't about that much the hardware, because oftentimes people are stuck with what they have, but it might help. Anyway, thanks for watching, and good luck. Oh, and this music is from Frozen Synapse 2. Excellent game. You should be playing it. And yeah, no, that's it. Ta-ta.